Every once in a while, a game comes along that has a profound effect on you. Whether that is achieved through its characters, story, themes, soundtrack, or atmosphere, it's still significant all the same. At this point, the game transcends being a game at all. It's an interactive work of art, and you relate to it on a personal level. For me, Gris is one of those games. This is surprising to me for a few reasons, but mainly because Gris was an impulsive buy. I knew nothing about the game coming into it, and truth be told, I hadn't even heard of it. It was an experience that I just kind of, well, fell into. As I'm sure you've already gathered for yourself, Gris is an absolutely beautiful game. The landscape, soundtrack, and color palette merge together to create some of the most breathtakingly memorable scenes that I've experienced. The game frames scenes in such a way that you just have to stop playing for a moment and take it all in. There were times where I was left sitting in complete wonder, feeling lucky to have had the chance to experience the game, even if only for a few moments. My favorite scenes included both the falling sequences, as well as moments where your field of vision begins zoomed in and slowly pans out to reveal a larger, gorgeous landscape. Gris's beauty doesn't appear only on the surface level. The game's story and overarching themes of acceptance, personal growth, and courage in the face of fear truly make the game a work of art. That's the end of my spoiler-free discussion of Gris. From this point forward, I will be discussing both the game's story and certain gameplay mechanics. If you think Gris is a game you'd like to experience for yourself firsthand, I would stop the video at this point and come back to it later if you'd like. The summarized main story of Gris is one of great loss. The loss of exactly what or whom is up for debate. The game leaves it somewhat open to your interpretation. However, I believe that the game begins with the young heroine's loss of her mother, and in turn, also her courage to move forward, represented throughout the game by her own voice. The core of the game is her introspective journey through the 5 stages of grief in order to not only accept this loss, but also to regain her courage and continue to grow, eventually regaining her voice in the end. The metaphorical use of color to represent the girl's emotions is a constant theme throughout Gris. Even the title of the game, Gris, means gray in Spanish. The game begins with a complete absence of color, save for the girl's teal hair. The surrounding landscape is filled with only white, black, and shades of gray, representing her internal emotional state. She is empty, devoid of all emotion, in denial that her loss could have occurred. The landscape itself further reinforces this. It is nothing but a barren wasteland, filled with sand and crumbled buildings, remnants of a once stable and strong structure. As you progress into the game, your world gets its first splash of color. Red. Along with this, some life is also breathed back into the atmosphere. You find flowers growing here and there, and even a few birds from time to time. There is also now the presence of wind, a wind that when surging can knock the girl tumbling backwards. I took this gusting wind to symbolize the main character's internal anger towards the loss of her mother. It is not always present, and eventually does pass. However, when it does surge, it rages uncontrollably. In order to overcome this anger, the girl must adapt and grow stronger. In-game, this personal growth is represented by a learned move that allows you to physically turn into a solid brick. Figuratively, in this stage of her internal struggle, she is able to overcome her spells of anger by stabilizing her emotions in order to progress forward. The next splash of color introduced is green. Instead of a desert with strong winds, you discover a tranquil forest. Life is everywhere around you, from the coniferous trees to the chirping birds in the background. You eventually even find a new friend, which makes for one of my favorite sequences in Gris. You must team up and work together to overcome certain obstacles, as you could not proceed on your own. And thus, we can take this lovely forest to represent the third stage of grief, bargaining. A stage exemplified by struggling to find meaning, and reaching out to others for support. Your newfound friend is there when you need him most, guiding and lending a helping hand, and apparently, also eating everything in sight. The third color introduced is my personal favorite in the game, blue. The aesthetic that is created by the constant rain, pools of water, and deep dark caverns is extremely well done. It should come as no surprise that this sequence of the game represents the fourth stage of grief, depression. The feeling of sorrow symbolized by shades of blue is a very common theme in works of art, as is the concept of spiraling downward, and even feeling submerged. Gris uses all of these themes to the utmost, but not too much that you tire of them. You do not feel heavy-handed, and as the player, you do not feel that Gris is forcing its message upon you. The game is constantly open to interpretation. The atmosphere and music are in the background, leaving you to experience and decipher their message in your own personal way. The fourth and last color of Gris is also the one that represents the final stage of grief: acceptance, guidance, and moving on. The color chosen is yellow, and it couldn't be more fitting. As you escape from the dark depths of the previous sequence, you are now elevated into a bright, shining palace that sits upon the night sky. Yellow lights shine brightly throughout, illuminating your way forward, even opening new paths that at first you could not see. While the blue portion of the game is my overall favorite, I have to admit that this final portion is the most beautiful. The palace almost exists in a dream. It is here that you finally feel that you have overcome most of the hardship, and can finally relax into the fantasy. It is fitting then that here, in this beautiful utopia underneath the moonlight, you finally regain your voice. By singing, you gain the ability to breathe new life into the world, creating beauty for yourself and those around you. It is after this sequence that the game comes to an end, with you walking on the stars, ascending into the night sky itself. You are again singing, but this time your voice is not alone. It is accompanied by another, in perfect harmony. It's safe to say that Gris is more of an interactive art piece than it is a game. That being said, Gris's gameplay shouldn't entirely be overlooked. The game has many platforming pieces that keep you both engaged and entertained. You learn new skills throughout its entirety: the rock form, which I mentioned earlier, a double jump, the ability to be thrown into the air at precise spots, and also the ability to swim. By the end of the game, when all of these abilities must be used one after another, it actually makes for some fairly good platforming moments. They aren't overly challenging or frustrating. If you fail a few times, you will surely figure it out on the next go. The game also has no enemies, or health bar to watch out for. There are two main bosses, a giant bird and eel, but they can't exactly hurt you either. It wouldn't be correct to come into Gris looking for a fantastic and hardcore platformer. However, it would also be untrue to say that Gris is devoid of gameplay. The balance between gameplay and the art used in Gris is exceptionally well done. I beat Gris in its entirety in 2 sittings, and a little shy of 3 hours total. However, the game is absolutely loaded with content and passion for its price tag of $17. Gris is a game that I would say is a can't miss for anyone that is a fan of this genre. It rivals both Journey and Abzu, and may even surpass them in certain aspects. Even if you aren't a fan of the genre or are looking to dive into it, Gris would be my recommendation for the game to try. I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but it wouldn't feel right to not say it again. Gris is one of the most beautiful, touching games that I've ever played. It's a game about hardship and moving forward. It's a game about falling down and getting back up. It's a game not only about growing internally and trusting yourself, but also leaning on those around you for help. But most of all, it's a game about learning to live with your memories, the good and the bad, and a game that I won't soon forget.